Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. Usually don't start the show out that way, but you know what? Why not? I'm your host, ObjectivelyDan, and this is the call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why. Every single week, I have a brand new guest with me, and sometimes I get a returning guest. And in this case, I have a very special return guest. It is Neil, the 604 Atheist. Neil, how's it going, bud?
It's going well, Dan. How you been?
I've been doing great. Now, let me tell you about Neil. Neil was on before, but the episode that he was on, there were some technical difficulties that day, and Neil didn't get the full Truth Wanted experience. And Neil's been a big support of the show. He's wearing a Truth Wanted t-shirt right now, which is fantastic. So I want to give Neil another chance. So he is back on with us tonight. And another special announcement, if you are watching this show live, if you see that link at the bottom of the screen there, typically our call-in studio thing only allows for calls in the US and Canada. Any other calls that are long distance, you have to pay extra, but you can now call in through the web browser. So if you want to call into the show tonight and you've been wanting to call, but you live somewhere else, try that link below and you can come talk to us. And we'd love to hear from you because we got open lines. Of course, we're just getting the show started, so go ahead and get in line if you want to talk to us. But first, I want to talk to my good buddy Neil. Neil, how have things been for you in quarantined Canada?
Quarantine Canada. Well, they kind of loosened things up a little bit just recently. So I took the opportunity to come up to a place here called Summerland. It's about 4.5 hours away from where I am, and see my dad, see how he's doing, check in with him, and hang out here for a week or so, and then head back down and go back to work and all that. Because I've been working the entire time because we're considered an essential service or whatever.
Sweet.
But, yeah. So, and we get tested every couple of weeks. So far, so good. But if I'm not working, I'm at home usually, or I've come up here for a week and a half. So.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, in case you guys have never met Neil before, he has his own YouTube channel where he talks to other atheists, and he does a bunch of different stuff. He doesn't always talk to atheists either. He opens the conversation up to a lot of different people, but in particular, you talk about deconversion stories a lot.
That's right. Yeah.
And you just do a lot for the community. Actually, I could go through a whole bio of what Neil does, but it would take up like our whole first 20 minutes of the show. I mean, Neil does a lot for the community, which is great because I wanted to ask you tonight, Neil, about activism, because I get messages from people who are like, hey, what can I do to do more and talk to other people about this stuff? And yeah, not everybody has the means to start a YouTube channel or to donate money or, to do any of that kind of stuff. And so they just want to get involved. So I wanted to kind of brainstorm some ideas with you tonight, starting off with how can people get involved? Because I know you're involved with quite a number of different organizations and you kind of do a bunch of different stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I'm involved with Canadian Atheists. I'm the community advocate for Canadian Atheists. My very good friend Randolph Richardson is the president of that. So we organize get-togethers from time to time. Well, we will once the COVID thing is gone by. Right now, It's like online meetings or Zoom meetings and whatnot. A really good way is to help some of your favorite, known atheists, help them retweet stuff that's important, you feel, like the International Atheists Association or whatever that I'm also a member of with Courtney Hurd here in Summerland where I'm at right now. And actually I'll be getting together with her and a few others for a Skeptics in the Pub, of course, remaining with the social distancing and all that. We're going to put together a little brainstorming thing there as well tonight. And you could also be a volunteer at any of the events that come through your town, especially if you're very interested in going to that event. A great way to get in is to be a volunteer, which I have done a couple of times on a couple of different things that have come through here as well. If you, again, this is an afforded thing, you can come down to Faithless Forum and meet other atheists when that goes on, right? And,
not this year, but hopefully next year.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I'm pretty sure by next year we should probably be okay.
I think so too. I hope so too. I think another thing. Yeah. Like when I was first trying to learn how to get involved, I think the first thing I did was like join a Facebook group. And that was cool. Because just having conversations with other people about this stuff is really refreshing, especially if you're just kind of joining this stuff. Eventually, I had the means to start traveling to the atheist community of Austin, and I started doing some stuff out of there. But I'm lucky. Like, I am so lucky because there is the atheist community of Austin is only in Austin, and I get to do great stuff here. But what do you do when you're in the middle of Oklahoma or Montana, where like the only atheist group might be your Unitarian church full of people you can't relate to,
There's a lot of secular student alliances around the world. You can get involved with one of them. There are multiple. I'm pretty sure almost every city has some form of a humanist organization. Like we have the BC Humanists, which I'm also part of. So you can get involved with that. Again, some of these also have a membership fee, but they're usually fairly nominal, and they're good for a year or so. Some offer more than 1 year for a membership. So those are other ways too. Yeah, for sure. And Facebook groups is a really good way to get your feet wet.
Yeah, thank goodness we live in the age of the internet. Actually, the internet has become a terrible and awful thing. But like for the good parts, right? Like I would not have been able to talk to you or talk to just basically everybody in this community without it. Like I cannot imagine figuring all this stuff out in like the 70s and just being like, well, what do I do now?
The internet is a tool, and it could be used for either good or bad, right?
That's true. That's true. And I hope that we can do some good things tonight as we get to some of your calls. And we do have a few more open lines, but we got some calls coming up tonight. So would love to talk to you guys in just a bit. But I have a story for you, Neil.
Okay.
I feel like
stories.
like I've noticed recently here on Truth Wanted, I've started off with a lot of stories of conversations I've had with people. And it sounds like I just want people to realize, like, I talk about this stuff all the time, even off air. I'm just that kind of person. But recently I was posting on Facebook, which I never do, about Pico, the lovely cat who is sleeping in the back there. I don't think we have the Pico cam set up tonight, but he's in there if you can see him online.
Camouflaged.
Yeah, right. A friend of mine that I've known since preschool messaged me. It was like, hey, what's up? How are you doing? And we started talking, and I noticed that on her Facebook, she was posting about, I think it's pronounced Monet, which is a multi-level marketing organization. So it was like, oh, and like I have the advantage of knowing this person for a long time. So like any criticisms or skepticisms I might get out, they might be willing to tolerate that more than just some stranger on the internet, right? So I just brought it up. I was like, hey, Monet actually has a lot of like really bad FDA complaints and stuff. And she gave me the line that every other MLM person says, which is like, there's lots of competitors. So there's lots of complaints about your products and stuff and bad reviews, but that's just people who yada, yada, yada. Like there's some sort of line for that for every MLM that you ever.
Of course. Right? I'm sure the seniors gave them all those lines to feed people that have anything negative to
absolutely. Say. And I could totally tell. And now she hadn't been involved for too long. It was only a couple months. But I sent her an article about some stuff and we started talking. And surprisingly, Neil, by the end of this conversation, she was like, oh yeah, this actually, it doesn't sound super great. Like I wasn't super into it. I wasn't like a diehard defender, but like what you're showing me makes sense. And it looks like there's some like scientific problems that were wrong. Because another complaint of Monet products was that they were actually damaging, they sell like shampoo and other kind of hair products and stuff, that they were actually damaging people's scalps and stuff. And there were some pretty bad pictures and stuff that we were looking at. And so, yeah, by the end of that conversation, Neil, she sounded like she didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And that just blew my mind because it's one thing to maybe move someone's opinion a little bit. It's another to go that far in one conversation. I don't know if I've ever had someone be convinced that fast before.
You're an expert MLM epistemologist.
I don't even talk to people about MLMs that much, but like that was just enough. And so like I don't know, like I guess I tell that story just to encourage people that even if you're just moving people a little bit with these kinds of conversations, it's always worth trying. Because like I'm still friends with this girl. She respects me. She may not agree with everything I have to say, but like that conversation helped change things a little bit. And like that's how real action gets done, is by having conversations like that. That's so right. I guess I don't know, Neil, do you have any stories like that? Because that was pretty crazy for me.
Actually, funny that you ask. You just having our sort of second go around with this sort of topic. I just remembered about a phone MLM company that a friend of mine got involved with. and he asked me to go, and I said, sure, I'll check it out. And I went in, and after the big meeting, I took him aside afterwards. I said, Dean, get the hell out of this right now. So, this is MLMs are great if you're one of the people that started it and you're at the top making all the money that comes up that pyramid chain. But other than that, you're going to be suffering from this. So,
yeah, like I had lost my job in December, and when I was in between jobs, I got an interview with this company, and I didn't even realize it was an MLM until I got to the actual interview. I got that far along in the process, and I'm someone who is pretty skeptical of that kind of stuff. And so once I figured it out, you almost don't want to believe it, because it's like, oh, but this is a job opportunity for me, and I've been looking for stuff. Like, there's so much holding you back from wanting to be skeptical about this kind of stuff. And so I get why people get into it. And some of them are kind of shady too. And not all of them have the best resources or information on them either. So it's harder to look them up.
That's right.
So, and if they do have information, they probably have like, Google bots that put the pages they want come up first when they search for them. Right. So there's all kinds of tricks to this sort of thing.
Right. For sure. There is. Yeah. And it's a shame, because a lot of people get sucked into these things and they can get bled dry financially. And it's a friend of a family many, many years ago did the Amway. And they pretty much got bled dry from that. That kind of sucked.
Yeah. And it's like, until you can recognize the patterns, I think it's harder to see. I think that's kind of a key, is looking for the little things. Like when they go to their website, do they talk more about the products they sell or about the recruitment process? It's just like little subtle things that you kind of pick up over time. Yeah. And if you don't have those skills, it's a lot harder to figure that out. So
there's many gullible people out there.
But
they take full advantage of that.
Yeah, it's not just gullible people, though. I think it's people who also just find a way to rationalize it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because one thing that MLMs always say is like, oh, it's kind of like starting your own business. So there's going to be a lot of upfront costs and stuff like that. And so if you frame it in the way of, oh, I'm doing this for myself, this is me, I'm like I'm an entrepreneur, then that's going to be better than, oh, you're just going to pay for this crap that probably nobody's going to buy, and that's it. We're kind of done with you. You're on your own, So
yep, you get that initial startup kit and sink $300-400 into this, and then you can't unload it, and now you're screwed.
Yeah. So if there's anybody that has any experience with MLMs tonight, also that wants to call in, I'd be interested in hearing that, because I've heard some horror stories for sure about and 90% of the time it's financial loss. Sometimes there's like bad communication with people in the organization, but the biggest danger, I think, is that financial loss, and that's harsh. It's really, really harsh. So
it's a big blow, to somebody's livelihood. So
yeah, and people should, if they want to be entrepreneurs, they should really do it the right way and get set up with organizations that actually want to help young entrepreneurs, and not get joined up in something that's going to ruin your life. So there's that. So again, we're going to get to calls in just a second, but I do want to plug some stuff here. Of course, as always, we got the merchandise for Truth Wanted. If you want, you can go to that bit.ly link that's going to be in the description for getting some cool swag. And just like Neil's wearing tonight, which is really, really cool. And also, if you want to become a YouTube member, you can donate to that as well. You get some cool emojis and some other perks. And of course, we have the Patreon, which gets you your name in the credits, among other things. So please consider that. Hey, Neil's a patron of this show. You want to be like Neil, right?
I am. Yeah. Be like me.
Yeah. Neil's a pretty cool guy. So Neil, what have you been up to?
Pretty cool. What's this?
Neil is a fantastic individual, and I'm really glad he's here. What more do you want from me?
Man.
Come
Me too. I'm pulling your leg, buddy. I'm just glad I was given another shot at this, because last time I had a really crappy computer and the internet crapped out, my computer crapped out, and then I lost 20 minutes. So thank you for having me back on, my friend.
Absolutely. And you've been hitting up a couple other ACA shows too. You've been making some rounds.
Yeah. I did Talk Heathen last weekend with Vila Bianca.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun. It was really, really good conversations, I think, on that. We had some very amicable conversations with the people that called in, which is good, which I try to strive for.
Yeah, I think a common reaction I get from a lot of guests afterwards, they're just like, "Oh, that was really fun." It's like, yeah, this is a fun thing to do, getting to talk to people about their experiences and what they want to talk about. So let's go ahead and have some fun and start talking to people. So first, I want to talk to Steph in Texas. What's going on, Steph?
Hi, Steph.
Hey, I'm fine. How are you both?
I'm doing just great.
I'm just starting my first beer, so the night is young.
Yeah, there you go. How can we help you today,
All right.
Steph?
Well, I was wondering if either of you had formulated an opinion on gender abolitionism, or if you even knew what that was.
Yeah. So Neil and I were talking because we saw you come up right before the show. And I think I had an opinion, and then Neil hadn't heard of it before, right?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah. So Steph, if you could explain to Neil what gender abolitionism is and to our audience, I think that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. You'll probably get different answers depending on who you talk to. But I think generally it's regarded at the belief that gender roles in society aren't necessarily based on science or fact, and their very presence and their continued propagation is harmful, not just to individuals, but to society as a whole.
Yeah. So kind of the idea is, and from my understanding, is to kind of get rid of the idea of gender in general. You see this with other kinds of things too. I think another common one is people who want to kind of get rid of the idea of race,
color blindness.
Yeah, but in more of the sense of like they don't even want it to be a thing that ever comes up. Like they don't want any forms that have race on it. They don't want it to be a thing in general. And there's different arguments for both sides. I have to say that I think there are some really good arguments for gender abolitionism, Steph. The one thing that holds me back is just the idea that, and I'll give some of the good arguments, right? I think what's good about it is this idea that we're all kind of on equal footing, right? And that,
we are.
And that gender isn't going to determine your place in life or your path in life, and that you can just do what you want to do without that construct kind of holding you back. But the one thing that holds me back is I also want to respect people's identities when they present them. So I wouldn't want to tell a trans person that their identity isn't valid, or that we shouldn't even refer to it, because that's an identity that they've wanted to express for themselves. And I like being a guy. I like expressing myself as a guy. And so, that's something that I think a lot of people have personal attachment to. So I see arguments for both sides, but what do you think about it, Steph?
Well, just to address your point, so with self-identification or gender identification, it's just something that we do as a social contract, or as a way to show that we acknowledge people and their agency. It'd be very similar to, is your full name, your legal name Dan, or is that just something you go by?
My legal name is Objectively, last name Dan. Just kidding. That's not actually true. But yeah, no, part of the joke of the name Objectively Dan is that it's only like names themselves are only objective in the sense that we have like legal documents for them, but like it doesn't, beyond that, it's kind of also just kind of a construct. So yeah.
Yeah. So if someone's name was they told you Ben, you wouldn't hound them and be like, no, your name is Benjamin. I've seen your birth certificate. Right. Don't lie to me.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Right?
So gender abolitionism doesn't necessarily involve looking at trans men and women and invalidating them. I think that's a pretty radical approach. Well, even considering that gender abolitionism generally is pretty radical. You definitely want to respect people's identity and their agency, and give them the freedom to do the things that they want. It's not so much on the individual level, it's more on a societal level.
Yeah, and Steph, the only reason I brought up the trans example is because I think that that's an example of, I think, someone in society who has fought really hard to present themselves with a certain gender identity, and so I use that as kind of an extreme to be like, I don't want to take that away from somebody. I don't want to take away someone who has fought really hard to present themselves in a certain way, just do that. And with straight people, whatever, but like, I didn't earn this right. I didn't have to fight for a right to exist the way that I have.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like the idea, I guess, behind that, I think, is I want to respect people's gender however they want to present themselves. And I don't know, it seems to me, and maybe you'd have to convince me, Steph, that gender abolitionism does kind of invalidate that.
Yeah, well, it comes down to, you have those feelings and those opinions, but necessarily where did they come from? How did you develop them? It's generally from a form of empathy. You want to understand people, you want to respect them. But if you look at through the lens of skepticism or some other moral lenses, it makes it kind of a lot more murky, your basis for saying that, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, what kind of moral...
Just so we're on the same page.
Yeah. I'm curious what you mean by moral lenses.
Well, let's just generally look at how you approach the world. So do you use skepticism or believe that skepticism is the best way to come to truth, or at least believing as many true things and believing as few false things as possible?
I think I would agree with that. Yeah.
Pragmatic skepticism.
Sure.
Yeah. So when you approach things from that perspective, the argument that we should respect people and we should look at how they identify and choose to present themselves, and we should keep prolonging that necessarily is more based on utility as opposed to pure skepticism. So, for instance, would you want to believe a false belief if it had a great amount of benefit, or necessarily disbelieve something that was true if it had a lot of harm?
Yeah, so I definitely, I wouldn't want to believe in something false, right? But I'm not sure, and maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, I'm not sure how a gender belief could be considered false or true necessarily. Like it just kind of is, right?
Yeah, so if you tell me your name's Dan or Objectively Dan, I can't say that that's not true, but if we wanted to look at, should we form some type of legal system? How should we build our public libraries when we decide and we vote on where do we want to have restrooms and stuff? Kind of looking at it from that lens isn't necessarily the best way, considering that even biological sex is more or less a social construct.
So let me try to rephrase so I understand. Are you saying that you're skeptical of the idea that is it the best way to continue identifying as, I think you used the example of Dan, but you're trying to maybe bridge it to just male or female, right? Is that the best way to work as a society? Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it. And it's because there isn't really actually anything that is a male, female, man, woman. These are completely arbitrary. You could come up with some form of system to try to separate people into these groups or categorize them. But if you use skepticism to look at all those categories, you're always just going to keep knocking them down and breaking them apart.
Yeah, well, but I almost think that when it comes to gender identities, it's not really about breaking them apart and breaking them down. It's just more of an idea of how someone can navigate the world most comfortably. And express themselves in the best way. Maybe me presenting as a man isn't the most rational thing in the world, but it's what makes me feel the best about myself and how I interact in society. And if that's true, then I would think that I would be okay with that. And we could talk about how that could be a false belief, but again, I'm not sure how we could even, if we are saying that men and women are these social constructs, then again, it's hard for me to say whether that, like, the true false kind of binary doesn't even apply. It's just a label that we use, right? Like, to navigate.
Yeah, well, you can identify yourself, but as soon as you start labeling it or deciding that, it would be better for me, therefore I should use it, as opposed to, well, it's actually creating a lot of harm on a societal level, Does that make sense? So even though you may be more comfortable identifying as a man, enjoying identifying and having activities that are typically masculine, you might actually be doing more harm by propagating these ideas and letting them keep going forward. That way, when there's a trans man, they have some preconception of what they should be like, and they may endure lots of emotional duress. They might experience physical harm from people who do not understand or necessarily respect them, because their idea of what a man is and how someone presents might not always line up.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's an example of a harm? And I think that's an interesting example. Another possible thing, and we were talking about, Neil and I were talking about this before the show too, is by creating kind of a monopoly on two genders as a binary system, we don't give credence to a lot of other gender identities, and that kind of also can be harmful to someone who doesn't know how to navigate their experiences, who don't have that template. And you're right, the templates that we do use for a majority of people does come with these kinds of implications. Like, there's a lot of other dudes that do a lot of shady stuff when it comes to straight white dudes, and that I don't particularly relate with, but it harms me. I hear people talk about how much they don't like men and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, I technically fall into that category, even though I may not have done the same actions as somebody else. But there's an argument for that, I think. But Neil, what do you think? Because I want to give you a chance to give your piece.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, like I was saying earlier, I just think that this needs to be normalized so that it's not causing harm anymore. Like, it should just be like, everyone, you are who you are, and it should just be, well, I'm this, and then that's it. That's the end of the discussion. And it should be normal. Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. Hey, let's go play baseball, or let's go have a coffee, or let's go do whatever. Right. It should just be normalized, where it's not like somebody's trying to think about it or trying to make it an issue, I guess.
But to Steph's point, Neil, do you think that continuing to identify with the gender ideas that we currently use, could that possibly lead to harm at the end of the day?
Of course, sometimes it could. Absolutely.
But you still think
it's to end.
Yeah.
But I think we work to normalization, then that will end eventually.
Okay. Yeah, Steph, I think you're presenting some argument, and that specific argument I hadn't thought of, as far as like, a trans person trying to identify as somebody else or identify as this boilerplate, trans man status, and then figuring out, there's men that do these awful things, and then that kind of affects them psychologically. Yeah, that's an angle I hadn't thought of before. But I'm assuming, Steph, I'm assuming, Steph, of course, your conclusion probably is that gender abolitionism is the way to go.
Yeah, I think there's no real factual basis for gender, or even, like I said earlier in passing, a biological sex. It's just it's a completely arbitrary thing. And as it currently exists, there is a significant population of trans men and women who are not just, like you alluded to, being emotionally harmed, but also being the victims of physical harm.
Oh, yeah.
Trans women are disproportionately the victims of sexual assault. They typically... just basic things that you may take for granted, such as going to vote and having to show your ID, or applying for a job or social services where you need to fill out paperwork, that can cause emotional harm and duress. So generally working or advocating as a society that these things should be piecemeal dismantled until we can reach a point where we don't rely on them anymore, I think would be the most moral thing to do. And would probably be the thing that's best rooted in reality.
So, Steph, what do you think the first steps of implementing that would be on a societal level?
The first step for if anyone hears this and they decide, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, you definitely should vote. You should go out and you should vote for whichever candidate, whichever ideas you think best represent you. And that doesn't just mean, every 4 years in the United States. It means go to your local elections and be involved in the processes. Like, there are town halls. And you can go to that meeting, and the town hall will give you time, and you can sit there and you can say, hey, when we make this new library, I think that we should have not gendered bathrooms. I think that they're inherently harmful and that we should work to eliminate them. And you can do little things like this without necessarily creating harm, because this action itself doesn't invalidate people's trans identity. It just makes it so it's more inclusive and more accepting for people who don't, even trans women. There are some trans women who, there's this very bad idea in the culture of this idea called passing, that I want to look like a real woman. And that is just so toxic, and it's something that is only rooted by this idea that there is a ideal or almost kind of platonic woman form that exists somewhere out there.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Steph, because there is this idea that if you're not passing, you're not a real woman or you're not a real man, whatever real means, you know. And I agree with you. That's a really harmful idea. You should be able to
real doesn't mean anything, because we all have our own idea of what real is, right? So.
Yeah, you should take that idea of man or take that idea of woman and do what you want with it, you know. And if that means having a traditional, I say traditional, in a traditional Americanized female aesthetic or male aesthetic, then that's fine. Like I'm for you there, and I'm also in agreement with you as far as gender neutral bathrooms. I think that's just a good idea. But you know what I want to take away from this, Steph, and I'll get to some other calls here in just a sec, is that I want to be someone who is doing what's morally right, or what I consider to be morally right, and this is a question of ethics, definitely. So, do you think that, like, after this conversation, I should stop identifying as a man or identifying as male? Do you think that's the next ethical action I can take for myself?
It just depends on how you want to utilize the platform. If you think and you believe that this is the best thing for me and this is the best thing for society, then you should keep doing that. But other people might disagree, and will honestly have no real way of knowing if you're doing harm or good, depending on how you identify yourself. It's more of a thing that it's kind of like the bystander problem. If we all just hold on to what we enjoy or what we feel comfortable with, it may end up making it so that as a society as a whole, we all do the same thing, and people who are more on the fringes, they're the ones who suffer from it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Yeah, like one of the reasons why I started Truth Wanted was I wanted to change the way people were having discourses with people. And it was like, well, I'm just going to have to do it. I'm just going to have to be the example that I want to be, the change I want to see in the world, right? By like getting this thing started. Because that's just how you have to do it. All right, Steph, well, I'll think about it. You've given me some pause tonight. I've played with the idea of gender abolitionism before. And I've always thought pretty positively about it, but you've also given me some new perspective. So thank you for that.
We can all identify as
no problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I look forward to hearing from you again. Until next time, have a great rest of your night.
Thanks, Steph.
What did you think of that conversation, Neil?
I'm fairly new to the whole gender identity thing. Well, not new, at least a few years, but it's I see, me being the cis white jackass male that I am. I find I want to help people see clearly through this, but do I really have a place in it? Or do you know, like I'm sort of, I want to be helpful, and I want to promote the whole thing about people being able to be whoever the hell they are. But I kind of feel like, how people who are racist say, well, you should be colorblind, which is, I think I saw, who was it? Morgan Freeman one time said, well, how do we end racism? He says, well, stop talking about it. But I don't know if that's really the answer.
I don't think the don't talking about it approach is good, because I think when you don't speak about evils, the powers that be will continue to be.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, Neil, that's a great point, because I think a lot of people in our position, because I'm also a cis white dude, kind of have that trepidation. They're like, I don't know how to approach this without, they want to do good, but they also don't want to step on any toes.
Exactly. Right.
The way I think of it, here's the way I think of it, Neil. I think if you're thinking of other cis white guys that you want to convince of these ideas, who are they most likely going to listen to? Are they going to listen to the trans woman of color, or are they going to listen to another cis white guy? And I think statistically, they're probably going to be more comfortable hearing it from another cis white guy. Now, I'm saying that because, like, obviously there's lots of great trans voices and they need to continue speaking as loud as they can. But also people like are socially conditioned to listen to people that they think are in their in-group and think,
now, how do we change that?
Now, we definitely need to change that. Absolutely.
Right? That's what we need to change. They might be comfortable listening to me or you talk about it.
Yeah.
Ideally, they should be listening to
these other people. 100%.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's not the world that we live in right now. And like, I want to take advantage of my cis male whiteness as much as I can by doing that. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's like
I do, promoting the better side of it. Yes.
Yeah. It's like I want to be able to, if somebody can gain trust in me because they feel like they can identify with me in those ways, then that's leverage in a conversation that somebody who's not in my position just simply doesn't have. So I think that's the secret, Neil. I think that's how we do it. We take advantage of that, you know.
It's going to be a long road, but I think we can get there.
Yeah, it's using the privilege we have for good, I think.
Right.
I think that's how I see it. And then hopefully, I
think it's our only option, really.
I think so.
Let's face it, we are privileged. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. And it's like, as we dismantle that. Yeah. As we dismantle that, we do it through conversations with other people.
Yeah.
I really think that's how it should be done. But if anybody else has strategies, anybody else has ideas, call in or email the show. Because
we'd like to hear that for sure.
Yeah. Because that's something that is on my mind a lot too. But I do want to get to our next call. And I want to talk to Emery, who's calling in from Virginia. Emery, what's going on?
Hello, sir. So
I
was just wondering, since, Neil, you are a Canadian citizen, correct?
I am indeed, yes.
Yes. So I was wondering if you believe that Canada should become a republic.
You know, I think my friend Randolph would be better suited to answer this one. I think I'm happy with the way Canada is right now. I mean, we're still part of the crown, I guess you could say, but we are independent, and we have been for about 150 years or something.
Right. There is still a Governor General of Canada.
Yes, there is, yes.
And there have been some corruption scandals in the past involving that institution.
Yes, there have.
So,
yes, there have.
But now, to me, it seems like I've been to Canada. Canadians are wonderful people. They're a lot smarter than Americans.
Well, let's not get carried away.
I know there's... Right. And so it seems like Canadians are perfectly capable of having their own head of state.
Yeah. Well, we got a prime minister, but he still has to answer to the monarchy, we'll call it.
Right. So, and that just doesn't strike me personally as a good thing, because furthermore, since you're a very prominent atheist, whoever is monarch of the UK is also head of the Church of England.
Correct.
It's referred to as Anglicanism outside of the UK. And
I think
so. Therefore,
I think we just all need to become anarcho-primitivists and just go back to the way things were, and that's just the best way for society. So,
hunter-gatherers.
Right. It is interesting, though, looking at Canada and England and seeing the intermingling of church and state. But
it's happening a little. There's some shit going down. That's for sure.
But here's what's weird, because it's like you guys have that more than the United States, like on paper. But the reality is, like, your country and England and others like it are more secular than the United States. So it's like, it's weird, because like we're way more religious, but then we also have those laws that are more are diminishing every day, but like still on paper, like have those separations. So kind of a weird twist there.
Right.
It is weird.
Like the more the more religious people lose the debate on facts, the more they try to debate in politics.
Yeah. So Emery, I guess because this is a really different call than what I usually get, but I guess I want to know, since you're calling about it, what do you think the advantage is of Canada becoming a republic? Because it sounds like that's
I'd be interested in hearing that for sure.
Well, it would be possible for you to become president of Canada, Neil.
As much as I appreciate that, I really don't want to. And we have prime ministers, not presidents. But I'll leave that to people that are much better suited for that crap than me.
President Neil.
That's true, sir, and I fully respect that. But it just seems like the idea of having a secular head of state instead of a religious one who is a Canadian citizen living on Canadian soil would be a real improvement for Canada. I'm not going to argue that. That's for sure. Look to the example of India, actually has been a republic since 1950. They have their prime minister handles all the political stuff, but their president is...
Counterpoint, though, Emery. India has crazy religious people in their government that are influencing their policies a lot, especially on the science side. I would say that that's a thing. Hindu science become
a problem again. Yes.
Yeah, and we don't talk about it nearly enough in the atheist community because it just doesn't affect us, I guess. But Hindu science is making a comeback, and it's huge, and it's a really big deal. And
I've spoken to a couple of ex-Hindus on my show, and they kind of glossed over some of the similar points you're making right now.
Yeah, it's still there, even in a supposedly secular system of government like they have too. So I don't know if the organization.
I'm sure you have some. I'm sure there are probably some religious nuts in the Canadian Parliament too. There's going to be some. There's going to be some idiots everywhere.
Of course.
Yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make was sometimes the reorganization of the system of the government may not be what needs to happen. It may just be a culture thing. I think that's part of it. I think American culture has really kind of influenced the ties that we have now. I mean, if you ever see that documentary, The Family, I actually think it's kind of boring and I wasn't super impressed by it, but it does outline some important things I think people should know about the interplay between religion and government in our country.
Right.
So, yeah.
So
it's called The Family, right? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I did read I did see a poll. Unfortunately, I can't remember exactly where I saw it, where apparently they said 73% of Canadians agree that Canada should have a head of state who's a Canadian citizen living on Canadian soil.
Mm-hmm.
But no,
I'm not familiar with that. But if do you remember where you saw that? I could check that out.
Man, I really wish I could remember exactly where I saw that.
Well, tell you what, Emery, if you find that information, I'm sure Neil would be happy to read and talk about it on his
Find me on Twitter.
Because I can't tell you about Canadian politics. That's just not my thing. But I'm really glad you called the show anyway, and shared that with us. So thanks, Emery. Really appreciate it.
Find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter if you're on Twitter, or Facebook under Neil Bernstein. That's my actual name. I don't have a problem with people knowing. It's fine. You can find me there and give me whatever information you can remember, and maybe we can have a chat.
There you go. Well, cool. Neil, you're a brave man putting that name out there. It's really good.
I got nothing. I'm not worried.
What do you think about that as we're kind of in between calls here? Because I've always been a fan of, hey, use whatever anonymous identity you want. That's it's the internet. You want to protect yourself. But also, I always think that if people can put their real name out there, they should, because that helps normalize things as well. It's what
I'm on board with.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk to Skater Boy 69. It's another thing to talk to a guy.
Boy 69.
I mean, I'm sure
you used that one time or something.
No, but I'm going to now, unless somebody steals it. So Why wouldn't I? But yeah, it's like I mean I use ObjectivelyDan. Objectively is not my legal first name, as I put before. Like that's that's a thing I think about sometimes. So
What? You
yeah,
lied down? What's going on here?
it's not lying per
This
se.
is about truth, buddy.
Yeah, man. It's just how I identify. That's
All right. Fair enough.
But it sounds like you agree with me though. Like
I do.
yeah,
Absolutely.
like do it if you can, but not an absolute.
Oh yeah, but stay safe if you need to too. Let's not forget that.
It's harder now these days, man, because all the
That's
accounts are connected and stuff. That's one advice I'd give to anybody who wants to make content. Look at where all your shit is first, and make sure it's not connected. But something to think about. So I want to go to a next call here, and hey, it's someone who's been on this program before. It's Derek Hawke. What's up, Derek?
Derek.
Hey, the world famous.
The famous. What's going on, buddy?
Yeah. What's
going on, Derek,
so I did have hey, my buddy, how you doing? My cohort in COVID.
Good stuff, Derek.
So I did have it. I did have a topic, but I think I need to change it. I got the distinct feeling that your screener did not know who I was.
Uh-oh. You can't go changing topics when you told the screener one thing, Derek. Come on.
Come on, Derek. You know this. Come on.
No. I think I need to be. I'm fucking Derek Hawke, man. I'm Killer Hawk 1.
What is this? What is this?
I'm the star of Atheist Vanguard, man.
You know what this reminds me of? Tony Hawk has this thing on his Twitter where he talks about all the times people semi-recognize him in public, but like don't put two and two together. They're like, oh, that's Tony Hawk, just like that skateboarder. And he's like, yeah, that's me.
That's me.
That's me right now. Like, oh, I'm Derek Hawke. It's like, yeah, Derek.
Oh, that's that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. That just goes to show that we need to really hit hard on getting back Atheist Vanguard onto the show or out on the public again.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that, Derek. But you did tell the call screener that you wanted to talk about the value of deconversion stories. So what do you think about the value of deconversion?
Right up my alley.
Yeah.
And so that's how I met Neil. I met Neil last year for was it Atheist Day?
No, Faithless Forum.
Faithless Forum.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's where I got the a lot of us in this community have that deconversion story, but I never knew that there was a centralized place that people can come there and tell their stories, and not only is it such a huge benefit for the person, the storytellee, but it really has a huge impact on the people that are listening to this, that can relate to this, that know that they're not alone, that they know that they are not the only ones that have been subjected to these types of abuse. And it also shows them that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that it does get better. It can get better. You can overcome these things. So Neil, great job.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thanks. That means a lot, Derek.
You are one of my heroes.
Oh, come on. I do that. I'm with you, though. I feel it's important to have these conversations because there's people out there that I think don't realize that there are many of us out there that think the same way they do now, that they've left their beliefs. And there's a whole community that they need to be aware of. And there's a support line there for them, too. And that's why I always put all the helplines and links in my description box, like the Clergy Project and stuff like that. So this needs to be known, because as more and more people are finding their way out of these ancient beliefs, we're getting better and better all the time. The pews are emptying, as they say.
Well, I really like the value of deconversion stories too, because when I was first kind of on my journey, I felt like I couldn't relate to the average atheist. Like I wasn't in that headspace yet. But when I heard someone's story, it's like, oh yeah, that person they were before, that's me. I'm closer to that. And seeing the pathway kind of helped mirror my own sense of where I was on my own path, right? And so like when you get to relate to people on that level, it humanizes people a bit. Suddenly, atheists aren't just this out group that are just kind of doing their own thing. They are me. They are other people who thought the same thoughts that a lot of people think in their life, and just kind of went further with it, you know?
Exactly.
So it's super.
I think we talked about that. Oh, I'm sorry, Derek.
No, I got phone issues. No, but yeah, it's just such a really important thing. And I want to kind of tie it back to the earlier conversation that you were having with Steph regarding these new concepts and normalization. That's the direction. That's a really good point that you brought up, and very insightful, is the normalization of these concepts. That's how the gay and bi community has had so much success in integrating into society, is because we worked fucking damn hard in the 80s to become normalized, to show that we were normal people, that we, I'm like you. I'm like you. I don't understand the trans issues. I'm an ally, though, because I know that that these are things are not to judge a person by. I'm open-minded to learning new things. Kind of like you. I don't know if it's necessarily my struggle, but I'm definitely will be an ally with them.
Of course.
But again, that was what happened with the gay and lesbian communities back in the 80s and 90s. Is that it was we needed allies. We needed a voice. We needed to show we're not deviants. We're not mentally ill. We're normal people. We have normal lives. We have normal sexual desires. So,
you're absolutely right. It's as atheists, I feel that, or skeptics in general, really, like, we have a call to be the most open-minded as possible. I think that's something that we can generally take pride in. We haven't always been the best at it, but damn it, at the end of the day,
correct.
Well, open-minded, but not too open where your brain falls out.
Sure. But I feel like at the end of the day, the atheist community has been really good vanguards for new ideas. We're certainly going to be adapting those ideas than like the conservative Christian right or something. Like we're at least going to, even if we don't always get it right, we're at least having those conversations. I'd rather somebody talk about it than not feel like they can't talk about it, and with the due respect, right? With the due respect. And we can, as all three of us, again, cis white dudes, like we are not the topic of the conversation, right? It's not about us. So we do have to approach it with that mindset that at the end of the day, we're talking about other people, and we need to give them the respect they deserve, and understand when we need to shut up and just like let people talk. Because as a group, cis white dudes haven't always been able to do that in the past, but we can, right? We can learn to be better and help. I
don't know if it's a case of haven't been able to. It was probably a lot of a case of we just didn't want to back then.
Yeah, or just like have a problem of mansplaining or something. Like it's definitely a thing. So,
Derek, I think we went over some of this.
What's the final thing before I go?
Okay.
All right.
So when I was on your show back, I believe in October, there was a prophecy that was made that was supposed to come true on the 22nd of December.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah. So we did address
about it.
Yeah, we addressed it a little bit on the show. Nothing happened. So yeah,
weird.
Weren't you supposed to meet that wizard in like the forest or something?
I'm pretty open-minded, but I'm not going to meet wizards in the forest. I'm
not a wizard.
Neil, if anybody's a wizard, probably you. But we don't meet in forests, though. We meet at convention centers. Like that's, I think, a big difference. But yeah, nothing actually happened with that. But I'm glad you brought it up because, hey, there's a prophecy. Didn't come true. So I think those guys are trolling, but it is what it is. So anyway, Derek, thanks for calling in.
Yep.
Good hearing from you, bud. And
good to talk to you, bud.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks for talking about the value of deconversion stories, because Neil's all about that, right, Neil?
Just a little,
Just a little. No, it's good. It is very valuable, the work that you do with that, because again,
that's why I chose to do that. And there weren't too many others really doing it, so I figured it was a niche that could need more shovels of cement in there, So
yeah, and you talked about my deconversion story too. So maybe
I did. You've been on the show. It was actually really good conversation I think we had back then.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, definitely. If people want to know my story who don't, Neil's a good avenue to kind of look at that. So
pretty sure my moderators are also in the chat, and IQ, if you're there, stick or Kristen, if you're there, stick the link in there, and then people can.
Yeah, there you go. Speaking of which, those of you who are watching, we're not going to be able to do an after show Discord tonight. So usually we do get to do that. That's a chance to talk to me and the guests after we do something live. But just so you guys know, we're not doing that tonight. But probably next week.
We have plans.
I guess. Yeah, we both have some plans. Unfortunately,
but I won't be here next week. But maybe I'll pop in anyway.
Yeah. Neil's yeah. Let's go ahead and go to our next caller here. This is Jimmy, calling in from Texas. Jimmy, what's going on?
How you doing, Jimmy?
Hey, what's up, guys? I didn't think you were going to take my call so quickly.
Yeah, we had somebody else, and then they dropped right before, so you were next.
Well, I wanted to speak about how you guys interpret evidence for God in a more empirical or scientific setting versus how you interpret evidence for God in a philosophical or a theological context, how it's defined in Scripture. Do you make a distinction? Do you think one holds, should the atheist define what evidence is, or should the theist define it?
Oh, God.
I think if you're having a conversation.
To get more to the point, it's commonly mentioned on the show as the Damascus Road experience, the direct revelation of the Holy Spirit, or the beatific vision, theoria, and so forth.
Yeah, but again, those are examples that people use, and I still kind of lean back to how do they know it wasn't all inside their heads?
Yeah, Jimmy, this is a freaking fantastic question, because this is something I've obviously thought a lot about. I know Neil has too. So I think as Christians, we're kind of brought up with this idea of what is appropriate evidence, right? And the evidence is though. Yeah. Well, I think the casual Christian brings up the idea of evidence as being personal experiences or relating experiences to Scripture, finding meaning through that, or doing events in tandem with other people. It's a different idea of how we confirm God's existence than probably what Neil or me or other people are looking for. And so there is a distinction there, yes, to the average Christian, absolutely, to how I would want to, essentially demonstrate the existence of a God versus how they might. And so that's a learning curve as well. And it's also an impediment to a lot of the conversations that we have with people, because we'll be like, well, we have studies for X, Y, and Z that show this, and that. And they'll be like, yeah, but I heard God once talk to me in this moment. And it's like, I can't, dissect that because I wasn't there.
And how do you demonstrate that?
Yeah. And we're generally people who are looking for demonstrations of something. So
we do. We're very empirical when it comes to the evidence side.
Well, no, I understand that, but what I'm getting at is that inside Scripture, for instance, they'll say that if you want a demonstration of the Holy Spirit, then you practice spiritual disciplines like meditation, contemplation. Do you guys practice anything like that, or?
Oh, yeah, I did for years and years because I was trying to find the right spiritual path. I'll give you a little reason as to why. I was born to a Christian couple, but given up for adoption because my biological father's mother was quite a staunch Catholic, and that's a big no-no. But I was adopted by and raised by Jews. So I already had that little weird thing going on in my head from the get-go once I found out about it. Well, why, if the Scriptures are true and this Jesus person is true, why would this allegedly all-knowing, all-loving deity put me in a group or in a family with people that don't believe in Jesus? So I had that conflict in my head the entire time, right?
Sure. I mean, I was asking you about your practices in meditation, and you went off there. But I would ask you, how did you practice meditation? Like, what went on in your head as you did it? I mean, if you recall, I don't know if you practice it anymore.
From time to time, I do. I just sit and I have an incense that I very much like that I light up every once in a while called Nag Champa. And I just sit and I close my eyes and I breathe and I just think about stuff. Like if I'm having a rough time, it's all more just meditation. There's nothing spiritualistic about it. It's really just for a personal cleansing, we'll say, for my own mind and thoughts. I do that now.
Well,
but
I mean,
before,
it's very different from what I've heard of disciplines as contemplation, for instance, or quietism. Christianity also calls it hesychasm. There is a practice in meditation where it's not about thinking about things. In fact, that's the impediment of this type of meditation. In other words, there is a cessation of thoughts where you completely try to keep off thoughts.
You can't do that. That's actually physically impossible.
Jimmy, I'll say this. Christian meditation has a really interesting history that a lot of Christians don't really talk about. There's a lot of actually different contemplative meditations that a lot of the Eastern Church Fathers really talked about. And what in my Christianity in the later years, I often did what's called what's the name of it? I can't remember, but it's I should know the name of it. But basically, the idea was to take a part of Scripture and kind of meditate on what that Scripture is telling me. And there's a whole process, a formalized process for some of these meditations that you wouldn't necessarily see in probably your typical, church setting, because it is kind of it's a private practice more so. And we don't see it as over here, I guess, in the United States. A lot of what we see in meditative practices, a lot of people don't think meditation is part of Christianity, but it totally is. It totally is if you look at the history of it.
It's part of many cultures.
Yeah, it's practice at its core. I don't know if you're familiar with this term volition.
Volition, yeah.
Volition, VOLITION.
Yes.
Volition is like your will, the feeling that you have that you will your breath, or you think. I think these thoughts. I do these things. I do this action. I behave this way. Or the ego. Some might say. The type of meditation I'm talking about is the cessation of volition. And, so someone in the chat said that's the worst type of meditation you can practice. It sounds anti-intellectual. It does. It sounds like it's the stupidest thing you can ever do. But it's, I guarantee you, if you've ever tried it, it's one of it's the most difficult things. Neil said that it's impossible, but no, that is what meditation is. And
I want to go back.
There is ways to achieve that.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, because you said in Scripture, kind of God is supposed to reveal himself through meditation. I think you said something along those lines that's demonstrated in Scripture. And I don't know exactly where you're looking at that. I know in the book of Matthew, there specifically says it is written, like, do not put the Lord thy God to the test, right? In other words, you're not supposed to test God. So, like, that's a thing.
Right.
I know for sure. But also, if you look at stories like the story of Elijah in the Old Testament, his whole kind of narrative arc was that he didn't want to, like, do these things for people because he was scared and nervous. And God was like, no, go demonstrate that have faith in me and do these things. And he kind of caused these miracles to happen in front of people. So, like, there's kind of some contradictory ideas in the Bible, and I would ascribe that to being, well, the Bible is written by various authors in different time periods who had different ideas about what God was and what he was supposed to do. So regardless, right, I'm not sure if there's any reliable way to demonstrate the existence of God, which I'm not sure if that was the heart of your original call, but I had the feeling that's what it is. I don't know if...
Okay, I think I can sum it up for you, man. Because I'm watching the side chat. I don't know if you're watching the side chat, but everyone's saying like, "Oh, wait till he mentions DMT." Neil, I'm Kathy, man. I'm the one that's always trying to get a hold of you, man. And
hi, Kathy. How are you, buddy?
What's up, man? Here's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
people are trying to equate this experience to is the highest point of the psychedelic experience with DMT or mushrooms, the heroic dose, and so forth.
Come on, Cafe, you know that I've said many times that you can't, your mind has been altered, so you can't not express that as a form of reality in any way, because your brain has been altered by a hallucinogenic of some kind. So I've heard you say
that.
Okay.
But here's the main point. Here's something that you denied all the way to the very end when I was in your chat room. I said there is no definitive scientific study out there that demonstrates that consciousness is generated within the brain. You remember that? There is, my friend. You can look it up. I maintain there is.
Okay.
You can find it.
Okay. All right. I see your point, and knowing what I know because of things that I do like for a living and stuff like that, they do know that consciousness is derived in the brain. They're still trying to figure out which specific areas it comes from, but they do know that it is derived in the brain.
All right.
Because
I
the only place
and all the viewers to try to look up a single study that demonstrates that, and I'll leave it at that, man. I appreciate y'all taking my call.
Fair enough.
That's all you want to go? Because I'm interested, because are you suggesting it comes from somewhere else besides the brain? Right. Because what would that be?
Well, the reason I think it's so hard, the reason I think they call it the hard problem of consciousness is because you have neuroscientists that are supposed to study, the mind, psychology, consciousness, and so forth. But they don't understand what physicists understand with quantum physics. In other words,
there it is.
Wine.
No,
I'm not talking about. No, I'm not suggesting this is the case. I'm saying that it's considered because classical mechanics cannot explain consciousness. So they posit it
Jimmy,
may be deeper than that.
Jimmy, here's what I know. If I shot a gun in your head right now, that's going to affect your consciousness.
Yep.
It's just going to happen.
It would be the same as smoking DMT, man. That's the same thing.
Yes.
The Kurt Cobain shooting himself with a shotgun is the same thing as smoking DMT.
Yes, I agree, because it affects the brain.
That's right.
That's the common denominator in both of those actions.
Well, the argument is that is it emergent? Whether it's emergent, you can have
consciousness is an emergent property of the brain.
Yes, you can consider it that it's maybe emergent to the brain, or you can consider the brain as a transceiver of the consciousness.
Oh, never mind.
If you consider the brain is something more like a transceiver of consciousness, you still have this emergent property. It looks identical either way. That's why it can't be solved, because that's why they call it the hard problem. There is no way to distinguish.
You can't say it can't be solved. They've said they can't this, that throughout history, and then we ended up with.
Here's the thing about transgender. Here's the thing about transceiver.
Right, that's why I said we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. Right, we'll leave it there. I appreciate you taking my call. That was
hold on.
Obviously, hang on, Jimmy, because you've obviously had this conversation with Neil, and I'm catching up here. Okay, so I've heard of this idea before of a brain acting as a transceiver. But the thing that we know about transceivers, right, is that we identify their construction because, one, we made them, but we know how it works. In other words, we know where those signals are coming from.
Sure. But here's the analogy in psychedelics, though. Your transceiver now, your ordinary state of consciousness now is akin to 56K connection to the internet. And when you take psychedelics,
make a metaphor. You can certainly make a metaphor, but a metaphor is not.
You went to broadband, man. You went to infinite.
No.
There's no end.
You have to demonstrate.
You no longer identify with the material body. You no longer identify with ego. They call it ego death. With this spiritual resurrection, reset on.
I don't play any of that crap, dude. I'm sorry.
So on and so forth.
I disagree.
You can face bomb all you want, but you guys haven't done it, man. Matt.
No, Jimmy. You haven't done it. You have not demonstrated to me in the slightest that the brain is a transceiver. All you've said is it's kind of like a 56K modem, which some things are kind of like other things. That doesn't mean that's what they are. You have to be the one to show me a study that says brains are transceivers, man. You can start by showing me the source of the signal. That'd be cool. But Otherwise, this is just speculation. You can speculate all day, but there's nothing showing that. All I know is that consciousness comes from the brain, whether it's a transceiver from an interdimensional alien or some sort of ultimate creator. Yeah, transceiver, whatever. I don't know.
We have sensory senses. Our senses feed our brain, and we go from there. That's
okay. Fine. That's where we left off. That's where I was trying to leave off. I said, look it up for yourself, Dan. Try to find me a study that shows consciousness is generated by the brain.
We already talked about this, and we have solved that issue. I'm going to let this call go, but thanks, Jimmy, for calling in.
Thanks,
again.
Jimmy.
If I shoot a gun, like we already said this, if I shoot a gun to your head, it's going to affect your consciousness.
Yep.
If I shoot a gun to your liver, it's not going to do the same thing. Like, it's just, that's as simple as I can make it. But like, yeah, we definitely know that consciousness is coming from the brain. And historically, actually, now this is interesting, Neil, because people didn't always realize that, right? Like, that's a pretty new idea. Yep. It's pretty, like, it seems pretty common sense to us, but
like
there were
from them.
Yeah,
the whole idea of the soul and everything, sort of a birth, I guess, right?
Yeah, the soul was actually outside the body, or like this idea,
but could leave.
Yeah, it's like it kind of, the receiver idea that Jimmy was talking about is probably more akin to what the Catholic Church originally believed versus what they would call now. You know, and a lot of people don't realize that. And ancient cultures also take specific organs and thought that they had more control over our bodies than what they actually do. And we do have neurons in our stomach that also like affect us in different ways. So it's fascinating conversations there, but
it's like taste buds in the rectum. They don't work the same way as the ones in your mouth, folks. So relax.
Like obviously the way that we control ourselves is much more complex. It has to deal with hormones. It has to deal with different chemical compounds, and that's an idea that's hard for people to accept, because we want to be more than just physical things. But I can't see that beyond what we are. You know, like, I guess I'm a physicalist in that sense.
We are physical things, but we are physical things with unique personalities.
Yeah, that's true. Right. And we may actually develop AI that we could call conscious on some level.
I have no doubt that eventually will happen.
We might already have in some secret lab. Like, I don't know.
You never know. It's possible.
But there is kind of, these harder definitions with consciousness. It is kind of a tricky thing to define.
We're dipping into transhumanism, I think, a little bit here now.
Transhumanism's cool. We've talked about it before. But right now, I don't have any other calls. If somebody wants to call in, because we do have a little bit of time left, I can take one more call. Otherwise, I'll just spitball with Neil here before
Come on, guys.
Like I said, unfortunately,
call in. I got these beliefs. I don't want to talk about them.
Yeah, you don't even have to use your phone. You can do it right on the web browser.
That too.
Go in from there. Well, you can do it on your phone too. But you know what I mean. You don't have to press a number. You can go to a link because it's 2020, baby.
That's right.
Got that technology.
It's the whole Jetsons era now.
Yeah, including the post climate change kind of world that we're living in. That the Jetsons. A lot of people don't realize that the reason why they were all in the sky was because the world was down below.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we're turning into on some level. It's
like Cloud City, man. I kind of want to live there.
Cloud City.
Up in the clouds.
Pico's running around here. I thought we could get another shot of Pico. But
Yay, Pico!
I can't catch that cat. That cat's too fast. Let me tell you, for a cat with leukemia, he is really he's thriving. He's thriving, man.
I got something I'll share with you now, Dan. Now that we're live. My very first cat looked exactly like yours. It was a little orange tabby. Yep. And I named him Ajax, actually, after the soap. Yeah, because somebody accidentally poured a whole bunch on him. It knocked the can over, and it poured all over him. And I was like, shit, I haven't named him yet. All right, Ajax it is. Because he had Ajax all over him. Of course, I brushed it out and washed him up and stuff, and he was fine. But
yeah, it's funny because with cats, you can just name them whatever the hell you want, and they don't care. I think that's the beauty, They're not going to psychically affect them in any way. It's just
the dog in Strange Brew. I'm not sure if you ever saw that, the Bob and Doug McKenzie movie.
No, I did not.
Dog named Shithead or something like that, or no, it was no, that was The Jerk. Pardon me, that was The Jerk. Steve Martin. Yeah.
Okay.
Steve Martin named the dog Shithead.
We do have one call here that has gone through the call screen, so let's go ahead and talk to them before we wrap things up here. Hey, Sarah in Idaho, you are live.
Hi, Sarah.
What's up?
Hi.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
How's it going?
What?
What's up? What do you want to talk about?
So that last caller brought up some very fun memories of therapy for me from when I was first in for psychosis, and the whole idea of like reality and whatnot, and the fact that 6 years later, I'm still not fully convinced that literally anything is real, and not just a part of like my mentally ill brain.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I would
say
like unholy Sarah, if you didn't get that.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. So I would say there's an argument to be made that the psychic experience, I say psychic, I mean in the psyche, not like mind control. Like the psychic experiences that we have are a part of our reality on some level. So you could say that they are real, but I know that's not what you mean. I think you're espousing this idea that there's like an objective reality outside of like our mind senses. And so you're kind of wondering, how do we get that if we're kind of stuck in a brain, right?
I don't know if we can.
Yeah. Well, and just the fact that I have had experiences that felt so real and then just weren't.
Me too.
Or at the very least, like, my therapist at the time, when I just couldn't get over this, it was like, well, if you aren't living if you're not living in the real reality, because I was like worried that the reality I had experienced in psychotic episodes was real. And he was like, if you're not living in the real reality, wouldn't you rather be living here anyway, where all of your friends and family and everyone else is living, even if it's not real? And that's like the only thing that like kind of got me past it.
Right.
That's an interesting way to tackle that problem. I would still go back to the idea that even my experiences have to be coming from somewhere. And if it's not coming from real things, even if it's drugs, right? Like that's still a thing that exists in the real world. So like that's still a part of reality. I'm just not experiencing it the same way as other people. So I guess that's my take on it. That's kind of a sloppy take. I'm sure some solipsist could throw down with me any day of the week. That's why I'm a show host and not a philosopher. So, take that as you can.
That is something I want to get more into with it, is like philosophy and stuff. When I get to a 4-year school, because I'm only at community college now, I want to minor in philosophy. And that's a big part of why.
Cool.
Yeah, it is interesting. And you being a woman in philosophy is a good thing, because that we need more of those. That's for sure.
That's true. I guess.
Yeah, I encourage that. Well, Sarah, I don't know. I can't probably convince you that we're, out as Matt famously debated with Cy 10 Brugenkate. We're not brains in vats, right? Like I don't know if there's a way that can possibly satisfy all conditions to convince you otherwise. But you do have experiences.
What's so interesting about it?
You can make predictions with your experiences, and you typically can't do that with like dreams and drugs and kind of with drugs, but not as controlled. So like that's something to look into. I think reality can be defined as the principles by which we can make predictions. That's you get what I'm saying there, right? Like there is something to it. Yeah,
definitely.
All right, well that's my existential advice. That's my existential pain relief of the day. Sarah, thanks again for calling in. You're really awesome.
Nice to chat with you, Sarah.
Yeah, that's really, really funny. Sarah is a cool person. Definitely go check out that Sarah Unholy
good friend
on YouTube. So I want to get to one more call since we got one more call
on my show.
Yeah, she's been on here too.
Yes.
So let's get to this last call here as we're wrapping up the end of the show. This is Andrew in Ohio calling in. Andrew, what's going on?
How you doing, Andrew?
Thank you so much. I want to thanks. How you doing, Neil?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm
surviving
good.
this?
I saw. Yeah, I'm a Christian, so I'm just checking you guys out.
Why do you got to call in the last 10 minutes of the show, Andrew? Come on, step up your game.
Secret is, Andrew, we can go a little over.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about the New England's dark day in May 19th, 1780. The naturalists will say it's a weather phenomenon, but I think it's something from God. Have you ever heard of this?
I've never heard of this, and I was looking at the call screener. I'm assuming it was this like an eclipse that happened that day, or maybe you can tell me more about it.
Yeah, fill us in a little. It sounds familiar, but I think you might need.
I'm just reading from the Wikipedia. It was a combination of smoke from forest fires, a thick fog, and cloud cover. But what the amazing thing is, you had to have candles required from noon on because it was so dark outside.
Okay.
Okay. So there sounds like there was a forest fire.
Happened?
So where does God come in?
As a Christian, right? Huh?
Yes, I did. Totally did. 100%.
So what happened at the crucifixion? Darkness.
What happened at the crucifixion? Yeah, there was. According to the book of Matthew.
Yeah.
And who?
Yeah, but not the other ones, though.
And it's confirmed outside the Bible.
Oh, it is.
Is it? That's interesting. Yeah.
That's new. Okay,
wow.
Tell us where that is.
Look up phallus.
Come again?
Phallus. Thallus.
Phallus. Okay.
I'm not sure if I've heard of that citation before. I'm compared to most atheists, I'd say I'm pretty up there in my game on biblical history stuff, but I don't know of any references that talk about the specific day in which all those events were going on.
Even if it was or did happen in Jesus' time, it's still a natural event, or could be explained naturally.
Yeah, just because the Bible says it was dark that day, that doesn't mean like it was God, right?
We had that way of thinking way back in those days, anyways, where everything was, oh my goodness, someone's angry up there, or somewhere. Even pagans had beliefs like that.
Yeah.
So how
Andrew,
can I prove the Bible to a naturalist? I guess.
Well,
that's a tough one.
Yeah, it is a tough one. So like when you say the Bible, that's really broad. The Bible encompasses a lot of things. I'm assuming what you mean is the life and events of Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not talking about Genesis and all that.
We're talking about
what are we talking about, Andrew?
Well, I believe in the Trinity of God. So yes, Jesus appeared in the hypostatic union in the New Testament. That he's always existed. If that's
right. Okay. So now, if we narrow it down, you're saying a lot of claims there. And Neil's shaking his head, but I just want to try to narrow it down a little bit. If we're just talking about the events specifically of the New Testament, right, in the life and times of Jesus, I think having secular and other accounts of the events would be a really great start. Because for pretty much all of the events of Jesus's life, we don't have a lot to go on. There's some things like Pontius Pilate was probably a real person, like that's a thing. And there may or may not be evidence of some of the disciples, specifically Peter, right, existing as a real person. And Paul certainly was a real person. Of course, he wasn't a disciple of Christ, wasn't there when Jesus was there. So that also makes things, that's kind of conflated a lot of times. People use Paul as like an eyewitness, but Paul did not witness anything in the life of Jesus. He had visions and he talked about stuff, but he wasn't witness that. So you're working at a disadvantage, I think, Andrew. And so to confirm some of those events, they're very particular and would have happened almost globally, if not at least localized to a degree, where a historian would talk about it. For example, you did talk about the day of darkness. What Matthew also talks about is people rose from the dead. Now, some people take that as metaphorical, but if you follow the text, it's talking about earthquakes and it's talking about people rising from their graves and would walk around Jerusalem. Now, I don't know what the metaphor would be there. Yeah, like it's
the section that Romero wrote.
Yeah, it's like, to me, that's played pretty straight. I can see how you could twist that, but like that's a really great example. If you can show a historian that also talked about, people rose from the dead this day, in Jerusalem, that'd be great. But so far, I have yet to see anybody talk about that.
There would have to be divine intervention for that to happen. Because once you have cell death occurring, you're not rising up from the
explanation, right? Like that's yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
Sorry, Andrew.
Do you believe the temptation happened?
I can't confirm or deny any of the events in the life of Jesus Christ. I know that any miracles described probably have natural explanations if those events even happened,
right?
Yeah.
Because he was in the desert for 40 days without food. Do you think that's possible?
No.
No,
I don't.
Look this guy up, Dennis Gaylor Goodwin. He lasted 385 days on a hunger strike. And he was in prison.
Hunger strike is different from not having food and water, though, which is what is specifically described in the story. I guarantee the man you just cited at least had water.
Yep.
But, yeah, I never said that. I said he went with 385 days without food. This guy.
Yeah.
Well, and actually,
I'd have to investigate that for sure.
I have to think, I may be wrong. Actually, was there water in the story when Jesus was in the desert for 40 days?
Apparently, it walked on some at one time. Canadians do that all the time. But it's frozen.
It's frozen. Yeah, there's definitely not any food. So, like, okay, yeah, sure. There are people that can survive for long periods of time with minimal amounts of food. Jesus specifically didn't eat anything for 40 days, though. I don't know if this guy you're talking about did not eat a single thing. That would be something else, right? If he's eating small quantities or is getting his nutrients in other ways, right? That's not the same thing as Jesus literally sitting out in the desert and not eating anything.
He had prana.
Yeah. And on top of that, Andrew, he talked to the devil. And so that's another thing too. But anyway, go ahead.
Do you believe Goliath could be 9 feet tall?
Sure. I mean, there have been people in recent history over 8 feet, so it's not an impossibility.
Sure, yeah.
But they're not giants in the fairy tales we're used to.
I think the cubits in the span is 9 feet. That Goliath was 9 feet. And when Robert Wadlow died, he was 8 foot 11 inches, and he was like in his 20s. So
all these things you're telling me, Andrew, are fascinating, but I'm struggling to see the point. You're just kind of saying there's some plausibility with some of these stories in particular contexts, but that doesn't demonstrate that the specific claims made in the Bible are true within themselves.
That's right.
Well, that's not what I'm going to do tonight. I don't have enough time.
Yes, unfortunately you don't.
Yeah, you're right, Andrew. That's a big conversation.
And you know what? Thank you for acknowledging that, because there's a lot of people that call in and do not acknowledge that. But yes, unfortunately, we only got a couple minutes here before we got to wrap things up. So if you want to give your piece on something and maybe call in next week to talk to me more, that'd be great. But we do have to wrap things up, unfortunately.
Do it, Andrew. It's a great conversation to have, I think.
All right.
I won't be here, but there'll be something.
What do you want me to say?
Well, if you had something else you want to say right now, that you could talk in the next 2 minutes.
The famous March of Progress, that road to Homo sapiens, that image they always show, that's been confirmed as a hoax. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, that's not. I guess. Yeah, that's not. It's. I'll give you that, Andrew. And I'll go ahead and let you go here. But yeah, the famous image of the chimps walking into man. That's not scientifically accurate, and no anthropologist worth their salt would teach a classroom and use that as an example of how human evolution worked. Again,
I don't think it's meant to be that anyways. It's just to say we originally came from, with the apes, from some common ancestry.
Yeah, and like again, just because that particular image isn't specifically true doesn't mean that human evolution wasn't a thing.
Right.
And we could definitely talk about that more some other day, but we're out of time tonight. So Neil, I want to ask you, where can people find you at if they want to see more of your stuff?
Well, currently no, I'm just kidding. They can find me on YouTube at Neil the 604 Atheist. I actually didn't use that as my actual name yet. I will eventually change it because you can see that you have the numbers and letters that are usually follow the channels now. But just type in Neil the 604 Atheist and it'll come up right away. I've done well over 200 and some odd interviews with folks. If you're into listening to deconversion stories, or sometimes I talk to cradle atheists about things like religious influences in our lives and stuff like that. So if you're into hearing stories about that, then definitely give my channel a look up. And if you dig what you hear, then give me a sub. And you can also help support me as well on Patreon, just like you can with Truth Wanted here, like I do.
Yeah. Yes. Consider, please, becoming a patron of Truth Wanted. It's patreon.com/Truth Wanted. You get your name and credits. Yeah, and we got some other cool stuff too for you to check out on there as well. Again, I don't make any money off that Patreon, and neither do the crew that helps volunteer to make this show. It all goes to the ACA, and it shows the ACA, that's the Atheist Community of Austin, that, hey, Truth Wanted is a program worth supporting. So please show your love by donating there if you want. Also become a YouTube member as well. But speaking of the crew, I got to give a shout out once again to the crew that helps make this program happen every single week. Vern's got his little kitty there. That's great. I got my kitty here too, actually. He just popped into my hands. For those of you who are watching live, little Pico is doing just fine.
This is what the internet is about, people.
That's right. It's all about cats. It's all about cats at the end of the day.
Hi, Pico.
Yeah, he's doing really good. Very active. Very active. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me. It's truth@atheist-community.org. That's a good way. I look at that quite often. I'm also on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, and I'm pretty active on there as well. And you can find this show on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, subscribe, leave a review, comment.
Do it now.
Interact. I would love to do that. No after show Discord tonight, guys. Really sorry about that. But Neil, if you could be any animal you want to be, what would you want to be?
That is a great question. And my roommate is going to hate me for it because I'd love to be a velociraptor.
A velociraptor is cool. I would say I want to be a chinchilla so I can say I'm chinchillin all the time. Thank you, everybody. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?